Horizon Forbidden West. What words can I write or speak to truly convey the enormous scale of this game, while at the same time express how lived in, how complete, and how detailed it is like very few open world games before it? Can I get my head out of my own ass? Well, I'll give it a shot. To sum it up in a couple sentences, Forbidden West will be the new standard, the new bar by which all future video game sequels will be measured, at least in my opinion. It keeps the feel of Zero Dawn and all of its best aspects while removing or improving the lesser in almost every case. It's like the developers had 100 new ideas of things to add, to the point where most studios would have been spread too thin and forced to choose only a few. Instead, the absolute mad lads at Guerrilla Games said, "Fuck it, we're doing it all." And they did. And it's awesome. Okay, so that was more than just a couple sentences. I just can't help myself with this game, as you can clearly see by the video's runtime. Hi, I'm Meromorphic, and unlike other video game critics on YouTube, I'm not one. I decided early on that I was only ever going to spend the time and energy on making videos about games that I thoroughly enjoy, games that I want to share with my friends and my audience. And as you may have guessed from my intro, Forbidden West is 100% one of those games. So, if you haven't played it and are planning to, know that I will be spoiling the hell out of this entire story here. If you're sensitive to that sort of thing, go ahead and play it and then come back. This is going to be an extremely deep dive, a thorough analysis of every aspect of the game, from combat to narrative, from game systems to performance, and everything in between. Alright, let's do this. Horizon Forbidden West is the 2022 follow-up to the breakout hit Horizon Zero Dawn, released back in 2017. Just as its predecessor, it's a third-person action melee game and a PlayStation exclusive at launch. The game centers around the main character, Aloy, who is pitted against giant robot animals once again in order to find a way to stop the world from ending due to man-made climate change. But this time, it's cherry flavored. I'm gonna have to talk a little bit about Zero Dawn a bit first, because Forbidden West is so inextricably linked to it and references it so much that this analysis wouldn't be parsable to anyone who hasn't played it already. So, Zero Dawn's development began all the way back in 2011.
Way back, in the long, long ago.
By Guerrilla Games, following their release of Killzone 3, which is a title I haven't thought about in a long time. Mathis de Jong, very sorry if I mispronounced that, in an interview with Inverse described how the game came about, where a team tasked with creating the next big title offered up 40 or so ideas, and what would later become Horizon won out in some kind of software survival of the fittest. And we're lucky it did, because that eventually made Forbidden West possible. Zero Dawn was released in 2017, right around the same time as Zelda Breath of the Wild, which redefined the open world genre and unfortunately took a lot of the attention away. So I'm sure Guerrilla Games, being a savvy developer, wouldn't make that mistake again. Oh. Regardless, Zero Dawn still won numerous awards throughout its lifetime, starting as a PlayStation exclusive and then later being ported to PC. In fact, by February 2022, just before Forbidden West's release, it had sold over 20 million copies, which is a very big number for a unique IP especially. It garnered widespread and well-deserved praise for its strategic combat with the Dinobots, an engaging main plot, and an overall beautiful world to explore, using the Decima engine developed originally for Killzone. However, it also did receive criticism, the majority of which was on the character's facial and bodily movements during dialogue scenes, which came across as very robotic, at least in the dialogue not tied to the main quest. To be fair though, there's a very good reason for this, which is that in these giant open world games, there is so much dialogue that hand animating all of them is impossible. So rather, the team compiles a huge list of quirks, tics, movements, and expressions for a character to use during a conversation, and then combines them using software. This allows developers to only have to spend time building up that library and then letting the computer do all the legwork, rather than spending valuable labor hand animating hundreds and hundreds of dialogue options. For more important quest scenes though, devs can still tweak things by hand, which they do quite a bit, making those scenes look better. However, for the smaller scenes, often it looks exactly like what it is, a computer trying to imitate human movement. Other games, such as The Witcher 3, used similar methods to better success, but for whatever reason, Zero Dawn's system was much more noticeable, and I promise there's a point to me explaining all of this that will come up later. Later in 2017, the game's only expansion, Frozen Wilds, released again to great reception. It opened up a brand new area which was covered in beautifully rendered snow that used dynamic tessellation effects to show Aloy's footsteps as she trudged through the frozen wasteland, and even a new badass machine, the Frostclaw. The story of Zero Dawn focused on Aloy, a young red-headed outcast who was raised by another outcast, her father figure Rost. It is set in a post-apocalyptic time, far, far in the future. The game is a journey of the self as much as it is finding out what happened to the world. Early on, Aloy participates in a competition that would grant her membership into the tribe she was born into and outcast from, the Nora. However, tragedy struck. Rost was killed and the Nora tribe was attacked by some unknown force and their corruptor bots, which can override other machines to become hostile towards humans, all of which set the main plot into motion. She searches the world for Rost's killer, finding much more than she originally bargained for. Along the way, she learns that the old world was destroyed by a swarm of nanomachines created by a man named Ted Farrow, and saved after the fact by a genius scientist by the name of Elizabeth Sobek. I am vastly oversimplifying for time. Realizing that the apocalypse was nigh, Elizabeth crafted a plan she called Zero Dawn. She came to the conclusion that there was no way to save humanity from the nanobots, which fed and multiplied themselves by consuming all organic matter, including humans, plants, animals, all of it. Instead, her plan was to create a super intelligent AI called Gaia, with multiple sub-functions that would all work together to reseed the planet once the nanomachines had been shut down. The plan was to construct broadcast towers to send out a deactivation code, but by the time this was done, humanity would have been wiped out. Thus, Gaia. Regarding the Dinobots, or machines as the game calls them, Aloy learns that even though they at once seemed like strange alien creatures whose only purpose was to make her life harder, were actually worker bots maintaining the Earth's delicately rebuilt biosphere. According to the Zero Dawn plan, once the Earth was terraformed enough to be livable, another subfunction of Gaia incubated humanity and let them out into the world, which eventually led to the tribe seen in the game. Aloy, it is revealed, was the last human born from one of these pods, and is actually the genetically identical clone of Elizabeth Sobek herself. Aloy finds out the reason that the Nora were attacked and the origin of the corruptor bots are one and the same: Hades, one of Gaia's subfunctions gone rogue. Around the time of Aloy's birth, a mysterious signal was received by Hades and caused it to go rogue. Gaia sacrificed herself to try stopping it, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Hades corrupted both machine and man to do its bidding, with its ultimate goal to wipe out all of humanity for some unknown reason. However, Aloy, the hero, was able to stop Hades at Meridian, the capital of the Karja Empire, and that is where the first game ends. I left out bits, actually a lot of bits, like some of the supporting characters, the tribes, and other things because we'll come back to them later, and the things we don't aren't actually in the second game. However, there is one that I want to touch on. Sylens is a mysterious figure, one of the only other humans not controlled by Hades that has a focus device. He helps Aloy throughout the game, but it is never clear what his true motivations are, nor where his loyalties lie. He'll become important in a bit, so remember the name Sylens. Overall though, Aloy's journey in Zero Dawn forced her to realize that she can accomplish great feats on her own. At the very beginning of her story, her one motivation is to become part of the tribe, to find out what she can about her mother, and she spent so long as an outcast, just her and Rost living out in the wilderness, that she wanted to be a part of something bigger. However, throughout the game, she realizes that she doesn't need others' acceptance. In fact, it's usually the other way around. Other people, even entire tribes, need her. By the end of the game, her accomplishments had won her the title of the Hero of Meridian, and she was accepted in every tribe from east to west, just by staying true to herself and doing what she believed was right. In the next game, she'll have to learn why all of that was wrong. Sort of. Part 1. The beginning. As you may have already noticed, this video is going to be a little different than my other analyses. I'm not going to split it up into different sections like gameplay, story, music, etc. I'm going to follow the main plot and then talk about these other things as they come up naturally, or sometimes not naturally, but I just need somewhere to put them. So let's go. Immediately upon booting Forbidden West up and starting a new game, you are treated to a gorgeous cutscene, in which Aloy explains that only a few months have passed since the Battle of Meridian, and in that time she has been trying desperately to find a backup for Gaia to bring her back online. See, while Hades was indeed defeated in the previous game, without Gaia, the planet's fragile biosphere began collapsing, manifesting as a red rot spreading across the land, as well as strong storms, flooding, climate change. Basically, rapid climate change. This has actually been a problem in the whole 20-ish years since Gaia went offline, but the world is now on the end of its rope, really starting to see the consequences. So Aloy must find the program and reboot the world terraforming system. Right away, we see that the story of Forbidden West doesn't start with quite the same luster as its predecessor did. Zero Dawn had this looming mystery of where the machines came from, why were they animal-shaped, and what happened to human civilization, all of which drives the player's interest. In Forbidden West, it's more just a ticking clock. Or at least it is at first. It does pick up as time goes on though, so don't you worry. Varl, one of the few Nora that actually helped and befriended Aloy early in the previous game, catches up to us right before we take control of the character. He wants to join Aloy in her quest, and Aloy reluctantly agrees. In this cutscene, we get our first taste of the soundtrack, which is fantastic. I have been listening to it as I write this, and I'm playing it now through the video. Hell, every time I log back into the game, the Forbidden West menu music just fucking pumps me up, man. It mixes these wonderfully rich strings with haunting choral pieces laid over the top, matching the melody. At once, it feels both tribal and futuristic, which is exactly what the game is. Funny how professional composers can do something like convey meaning through composition. The melodies themselves, especially the leitmotif that is buried in nearly every track, all convey a sense of loss, a sadness that really gets at the heart of how Aloy is feeling, and I love it. Finally, we get control of Aloy, and this is the part of the analysis that I was most looking forward to writing, but strangely at the same time, dreading? I'm about to say something that is going to sound really, really stupid, so don't judge me until you hear me out, okay? Forbidden West controls exactly like a sequel to Zero Dawn should. It feels like you just put down the controller for a bit and then hopped back into the game. Now, again, I know that sounds kind of dumb, right? Because it is a sequel made by the very same company. But this game gets that feeling down so well that the idea just kind of stuck in my head and I had to say it out loud. It feels so great, like greeting an old friend. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy and it's exactly like other sequels, but it was genuinely the first strong thought I had when taking control of Aloy. Now, Aloy doesn't have the same tools that she had at the end of the last game, obviously. She doesn't have the same awesome legendary armor that you could get from a long quest, which is disappointing. But I expected all of that. What I didn't expect was the explanation. Varl asks about the equipment point blank, and she just offhandedly says that it was taken by a group of raiders. Now, I get it. Everyone sleeps. Anyone can be ambushed. But come on. This is the savior of Meridian. Do you know how many Thunderclaws and bandit camps we single-handedly cleared in the first game? Huh. I wonder if this is going to have any story implications later in the game. Definitely not. Also, the performance is another thing that is immediately apparent. The game runs at an absolutely gorgeous native 4K and a stable, buttery smooth 60 frames per second, at least in performance mode. This is what I prefer, as I think HFR looks better than ray tracing effects at 30 frames. The thing is though, even in the open world, even when combating multiple machines in dense, lush forest, the game just doesn't skip a beat. It is polished to a near mirror sheen relative to the other open world games. I'm not sure if there's some dynamic resolution scaling going on, but it seems extremely stable. But having said that, there were some bugs. Like, for instance, I did notice the physics going haywire for a second every now and then, and a snap moth flying over me like Superman. Or a plant that's rooted directly mid-air instead of in the ground. Also, one of the side quests was bugged so that even after completing it, it wasn't updating in the journal or on the map. But other than that, there were no major flaws, and I'd imagine the latter gets fixed shortly if it isn't already. Probably the most annoying yet at the same time inconsequential thing was this time when Aloy was looting a bandit camp and kept repeating the same line over and over and over again.
They're stripping corruptors for parts. That can't be good. Looks like they've been salvaging machine parts.
Actually, that happened more than a few times, but I've heard Guerrilla has since gone in and patched it out. Point is, the game runs great. And that's really all I have to say, because when the game is running great, it gets out of your way and lets you focus on the gameplay, so let's get back to that. Anyways, the first hour or two of the game is a great introduction / tutorial for new players. As an unintentional test, I played this first part with a friend, and he picked up everything really quickly, so anecdotally, it works great. It is this scripted, linear mission where Aloy and Varl trek through the jungle to find this secret bunker where they think a Gaia backup is held. Along the way, they have to fight or sneak by multiple machines. So let's discuss the fighting basics. Just like the last game, you start with a dodge roll, a light and a strong attack for your spear, and a bow. Now though, you also get a charged heavy attack, which can knock down smaller machines in a single hit. Plus, it looks really cool. And these allow you to get in a critical strike. You can 1-2 punch the burrowers in this first mission using that technique, and it feels great. But all of that is just the tip of the iceberg on a generally expanded melee set, which we will touch on later. Aloy and Varl stumble onto the remains of an Oseram camp, apparently destroyed by a large machine using acid attacks. The Oseram are one of the tribes from the first game, most interested in salvaging old world and machine tech. The mysterious acid-spraying machine had closed up the only exit as it passed through, but Varl finds a prototype of a device which Aloy is able to repair, making her first new special tool. There are multiple of these special tools that Aloy finds and employs throughout the game, and they range in use cases. We'll discuss the rest as they are discovered. But this one, the Pullcaster, is great in basically every aspect. It is used to forge new paths, either by hooking or pulling on debris to clear a way forward, or as a grappling hook. If you've watched my previous analysis videos or streams, you know that I believe basically all open world games would benefit from adding a grappling hook and an energy glider. And goddammit, the beautiful bastards at Guerrilla Games gave us both. Now, you can't grapple everything here like in Halo Infinite, which is a bit of a bummer. However, there are a lot more grapple points used in climbing than there were in, say, Ghost of Tsushima, which tried a similar thing. As you move throughout the ruins, you find holograms and bits of information that piece together the narrative. This place was once run by the Far Zenith Corporation. Their stated purpose was to use an interstellar ship to whisk away the world's elite from the problems of Earth, all to a new colony in the Sirius star system. Aloy tells Varl pretty pointedly that they were unsuccessful in their attempt, and the ship blew up en route to Sirius. Wink wink. Well, apparently the fine people at Far Zenith weren't opposed to a little corporate espionage and theft, since they were leaving all obligations, responsibilities, and more importantly, jurisdiction anyways. They had planned to steal a copy of Gaia away from the Zero Dawn Initiative, which is why Aloy believed a copy was held here. Eventually, Aloy and Varl reach a cliffside, which is being guarded by 3 enormous machines apparently fighting each other. These are Slither Things, one of the many new machines to Forbidden West, and they are the ones you've been finding evidence of this entire mission, like the ruined Oseram camp. As I said, the developers went all out with the addition of all the things in this game. Machines? Hell, there were 26 in Zero Dawn, let's make that a cool 43 here, nearly doubling it. And that isn't even including all the many different Elemental and Apex variants. I didn't count them all, but there's got to be close to 100. That's pretty insane. The Slitherfang especially is terrifying. Its movements are so quick and fluid despite being a metal cobra the size of a small building. And 3 of them together? Nah, I'm good, dog. Realizing that they wouldn't be able to take down one of the machines with their current gear, let alone all 3, Aloy devises a plan to climb up what appears to be an old shuttle launch facility, which happens to be situated above the squabbling machines. She planned to cut the wires holding the shuttle upright and let it fall down on them. She does all of this by herself, not even waiting to hear Varl out when he tries to question her about the plan. This bit is important and we'll come back to it later. Aloy is successful-ish. After some improvising, the shuttle indeed falls on the 3 machines, but a stray cable takes down the platform Aloy had been standing on as well. She barely manages to avoid plummeting to an early death, only to be greeted at the bottom by a very pissed off but luckily pinned Slitherfang. This guy is basically the first boss of the game, and judging from the later fights against these bastards, she is lucky that its tail is caught under the shuttle debris. It shoots powerful acid jets, sonic blasts that leave you disoriented, and can quickly dart in for a slam or bite attack. This thing genuinely made my butt clench the first time I fought it. Perhaps it's my natural human response of fearing anything that looks like it's deathly venomous. I don't know. But eventually Aloy is able to take it down, even after it gets its rattler tail free, giving it a lightning quick and also literally lightning tail whip. Just past the Slitherfang lies the server room that they had been trying to reach this entire time. But upon finding what they think is Gaia, a hologram appears of Elizabeth and the programmer of Hades, Travis Tate. They had figured out, geniuses that they were, that Far Zenith intended to steal a copy of Gaia, and so they planted a fake with a little gifted logic bomb as well. Aloy does not take this well. You can feel the hurt in her voice.
The goddess.
There is no goddess. I told you that already. That's not Gaia. It's not what I'm looking for. It's nothing but a fake.
Ashley Birch, Aloy's voice actress, did another fantastic job on this game. Not just here, but throughout. She snaps at Varl with palpable venom when he enters and tries to console her, all while he's just confused at what he's seeing. Aloy realizes that she has no more leads on Gaia, but Varl convinces her to try the Spy Master at the Karja capital of Meridian, remember from last game. Perhaps the Spy Master can help them find Silence, and perhaps he might have some answers. Remember Silence? Aloy agrees but tries to push Varl away, telling him that her path will be too dangerous, that she will have to do more reckless things like with the shuttle and the Slitherfangs. She is trying once again to be the loner that the first game taught her to be, but luckily for her, Varl convinces her otherwise. The two make their way to Meridian, or rather just the outskirts. Unfortunately, we don't get to visit an updated version of the Shining City or its cool-ass primitive elevators. Regardless, there they search the Spire, the device that Hades tried to use at the end of the previous game to corrupt the world's machines all at once. Only what they find is evidence that Silence had preserved a piece of Hades left in the tower and taken it to the Forbidden West. So Hades wasn't destroyed completely, and Silence is a backstabbing prick. So their only move is to follow him. However, before heading out, Aloy is greeted by the Karja Sun Emperor, who is extremely thirsty for Aloy, along with most of the other male characters in the game. Seriously, I know there was this big controversy before launch about how manly Aloy looks. It even resulted in this picture, which is too fucking funny if you actually play the game. Dudes out there thinking Aloy should look like a cast member of the Real Housewives of the post-apocalypse. Well, she doesn't, thank Christ for that. But I have to say, the whole thing was way overblown, not to mention sexist as fuck. And they must have picked the worst possible still for that photo, which is a long way of saying you guys are crazy because Aloy is finer than powdered sugar. Side note, as I'm editing this, that one Karja lady that you do side quests for in this game is also really hot. I just wanted to add that bit in here. What was I saying? Oh, right. The Emperor gives Aloy a sweet-looking new spear, and then the two set off on their journey to the Forbidden West. Part 2. Chainscrape and the Open World, or holy hell, I can climb anywhere? After another cutscene, Aloy is finally let loose into the open world. Though following the style of Witcher 3 and Breath of the Wild, this valley, called the Daunt, is more of a microcosm of the larger world to allow players to stretch their legs, while not being too overwhelmed. And boy is it a great one. The way Forbidden West guides the player through its world is a masterclass in UI design and, more importantly, accessibility. The sheer number of options given to the player on how much or how little information is given to them is downright staggering. Basically, every HUD element can be toggled on or off or even made dynamic, so that they only show given the correct context, like combat activating the health meter. The quest and waypoint guides, as well as the compass, can also be toggled on or off or dynamic. Or even better, you get the choice to change it between guided or explorer modes. Guided basically takes Aloy step by step down the correct path towards whatever destination with a constant guiding icon, whereas Explorer just gives the overall direction and turns off the icon when it's not needed. This allows the player to play however they want. If you want your hand held, and no shade for that, then you can do it. If you want to turn off all info and be a pioneer, you can do that too. Now, I don't think the system quite reaches the highs that Ghost of Tsushima's guiding wind system brought, and there are some annoying things like the guided path not always picking the most optimal route between point A and point B, but it's still good in its own right. So, on a gondola ride down into the Daunt, Aloy is introduced to the town of Chainscrape, one of the main villages of this region. The main story goes through here briefly, but it's the side content that really shines, so I'm going to talk about that for a moment. Chainscrape is an Oseram town with a leader named Lundvik, the Oseram being a tribe from the first game. But Chainscrape is still under the Karja Empire. Lundvik is very anti-Karja, even butting heads with the administrators sent by the Emperor. He would have you believe that this is all to benefit the town as a whole, but Aloy soon learns differently. There are multiple side quests around this area, people that have run into various issues that require Aloy to solve, and they are all fantastic. No, really, all of them are. My favorite involves a nearby mine that was flooded, with Oseram miners still trapped within. The quest requires the player to use multiple gameplay mechanics to finish, including the new underwater swimming mechanic. Involving it this early on signals to the player that this isn't some tacked-on gimmick. Rather, it will be used often. I don't have anything special to say about it. I mean, it's swimming. The water looks great, which I'll talk about later, and the swimming is unobtrusive and very quick. Standard stuff, but it's great that it was added anyways, and I'll get more into it later. So Aloy makes her way into the mine, finding the stranded miners who have no means of egress, which means she has to find a way to drain the mine and get them out that way. It's a really great little quest, and it was right here that I knew this game was going to be good if all the side content was even half this good. Turns out the mine had flooded due to Lundvik's equally staggering incompetence and greed. Other quests around the area paint the leader in a similarly unflattering light, and all lead to a reveal that machines had somehow broken through the mountain due to his excavation attempts, sent by forces whom you will soon become acquainted with. Slowly, the larger picture begins to form, connecting all of these events together in a string of causality in a truly masterful way. It's supremely satisfying to finally get the chance to oust Lundvik and help his benevolent successor to take charge, a woman with whom you also get the chance to work with. So as I stated previously, one of the biggest criticisms with Zero Dawn was that the bodily and facial animations and dialogue were really robotic and just not very good. However, now you've seen some of the dialogue in Forbidden West, especially dialogue in the side quests, which usually doesn't get as much love, so you can see how big of an improvement Guerrilla Games made jumping to the sequel. Now I know you might be thinking this is early side content, maybe the rest of the game doesn't look quite this good. But you'd be wrong, and you'll be seeing that through the rest of the video. At this point, I had to take a step back and just marvel at the game. While I did so, I opened up the map to see the vast scale of the deeds that I had done, and was immediately floored by how tiny the area I had uncovered and explored was. Would all of the areas be similarly packed with engaging, interconnected quests and storylines? Yes. The answer is yes. But we'll get to those later. Helping the town has a practical benefit for Aloy as well, as it allows her access to the vendors of the area. They were closed down by Lundvik's order before, but once Aloy takes care of the danger in the area, they are open for business again. This gives me a good excuse to talk about the weapons in the game, though some of them you won't have access to for a while. Similar to the machines, Guerrilla went all out with the new weapons in Forbidden West. It seems there are dozens more than there were in the first game, including new archetypes like the Shredder and Spike Thrower. We still have the different types of bow for different ranges, the Tripcaster, which lays down tripwire traps, the Ropecaster that ties down fast or flying enemies, the Bomb Slings, which sling bombs. But the new archetypes are really cool too. The Shredder is like a sling that shoots out circular saw blades, spinning at the enemy. But the twist is they return back to your general vicinity like a boomerang. And if your spatial awareness is up to snuff, you can catch them and even send them back out. Doing this 3 times loads up an extra powerful charge, not to mention conserving ammo. It's a really cool weapon with a high skill ceiling and is a great addition. The Spike Thrower is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a souped up javelin that can explode and specializes in knocking over machines, opening them up for critical hits. The Spike Thrower, while much more simple than the Shredder, is satisfying to use because it packs a lot of punch. Beyond the new archetypes though, there are tons of variants on the old classics. To begin with, there are way more elements and damage types, each of which has their own unique effects. For instance, plasma buildup will prime a machine to explode, and any further damage makes the explosion more powerful. Drench water makes machines more susceptible to other elements, removing their weaknesses while at the same time disabling their capability to use their own elemental attacks. It's all really cool stuff, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. These types of interesting weapon choices were what set the original Horizon apart from other open-world games. The variety of weapons on hand, when combined with these giant hulking machines with their own elemental weaknesses and specific weak points, meant that strategizing every encounter was beneficial, often meaning the battle even began before the first arrow was fired. I'm beginning to realize that this type of strategizing capability is the main factor behind many of my favorite games. Learn more about myself every day, I guess. Another thing you'll notice as Aloy makes her way across the Daunt is that climbing has been massively reworked. Well, okay, that isn't completely accurate. Most of the mechanics are actually the exact same. However, in Zero Dawn, there were these yellow ropes and ledges that someone had conveniently left out for you across the world. And even then, it was only on a small minority of surfaces where these were available. It was all very contrived. So updating that system was one of the things that truly excited me about the trailer when it was released. It depicted Aloy climbing up surfaces that didn't have these obvious handholds, which seemed to imply Forbidden West would get free climbing, like in Breath of the Wild. However, what we got instead was sort of a mixture of the two. Aloy can still only climb when there are designated handholds, but now there are incalculably more handholds on nearly every surface. Only it would look kind of stupid to have these yellow ropes and ledges plastered over every single mountain in that quantity. You'd basically have a yellow mountain range. So they are only revealed via your focus, which makes a lot of sense given that it is a tool that scans the environment to assist you in whatever task you're doing. A great rework in my opinion. So while it isn't true free climbing, the effect is basically the same. And one consequence of this is that it imports all of the animations that Aloy used when moving between different types of handholds, meaning that you aren't watching the exact same climbing animations all the time as you are in Breath of the Wild, which is a pretty neat side benefit. But all right, enough with the mechanics, back to the story.
What, so you care now?
Yeah, no, I'm just making small talk.
Eventually, after completing side quests, Aloy makes her way to Barren Light, the town built up around the Karja guard post that lies on the border of their land. On the other side of that is a no man's land, a sort of demilitarized zone resulting from the Red Raids, which, okay, quick summary. The Karja had this sort of Mad King situation in the previous generation years and years ago. He infamously used the Karja's military dominance to raid surrounding tribes, putting many to death and others into slavery. This includes the Nora, Aloy's tribe, and was a source of conflict in the first game. It also includes many of the other tribes, including those in the Forbidden West, like the Utaru, which are a more peaceful people, or the Tenakth, known for their ferocity and mercilessness in battle. They were able to push back the Karja advances and dealt them some of their only defeats. It's because of the Tenakth that the Karja border exists where it does, and that No Man's Land exists. It's made clear that in order to follow Sylens and Hades into the Forbidden West, it would best be done with the permission of the Tenakth. In fact, the reason Aloy is sent to Barren Light is specifically because the Karja and the Tenakth are planning a parley, as the new Emperor wishes to mend old wounds. Aloy attends this parley, learning in the process that the Tenakth are divided into 3 clans: Lowlands, Desert, and Sky clans, the latter of which didn't show up in time, which delayed the proceedings. More on them later. Finally, things get underway, but
oh no!
The meeting is attacked by a woman named Regala, who is in control of a rebel Tenakth force riding machines. Aloy and Varl are forced to fight because the rebels do not discriminate when picking their targets. It appears that Regala and the rebels are attacking the Tenakth at the meeting, in particular because they are willing to parley. She hasn't forgiven the Karja for the Red Raids, and because of it, has started a bloody civil war. Aloy is finally successful in pushing back the rebel attack, including defeating Regala's champion, though the leader herself gets away with some of her group. In the melee, Varl is injured, and the Karja representatives are killed, along with many of the Tenakth. Plus, a character that serves no purpose other than to die. I'm not even going to mention his name here. Bright side of the conflict, though, is that Aloy gets an energy glider. Yay! And she's given free reign to travel through Tenakth territory. But yeah, I was way more excited about the glider. I freaking love this thing. It operates almost the exact same way as the one in Breath of the Wild, which is totally okay. That's really all that was needed. It's just another means of getting down from high places and allows the open world to be more vertical. Very simple upgrade that I am 100% here for. So finally able to move into No Man's Land, Aloy tracks down Sylens' last location and actually recovers Hades, or what's left of him anyway. It seems that Sylens had taken Hades to a place where he could virtually torture the sentient program, somehow. Point is, Aloy is able to communicate with Hades before it expires, to try learning what caused it to go rogue in the first place, and where a Gaia backup might be located. Hades doesn't really give her much to go on other than talking about the mysterious signal that caused him to go rogue. However, Sylens, having tracked Aloy's movements, informs her that there is indeed a Gaia backup located in a bunker nearby. After bitching him out for being really creepy and also kind of a dick, she makes the trek there, only to find the door overgrown with a red crystal formation. I had actually seen this before in the world and wondered what it was. Well, it's basically a key mechanism that is only unlocked once you reach a certain point in the main story, namely, where she's at now. Aloy crafts a new component which allows her to overload the crystals, causing an explosion and creating a new path through the walls. I'm honestly not too sure how to feel about this one. In general, locking players out of certain content until they progress further is okay, as long as the key has additional functions other than just unlocking said content. For example, the Pullcaster acts as a key for some areas, but also as a grappling hook all over the place, which is awesome. However, the Igniter, the tool that ignites the crystals, serves only to unlock these areas, and that is less cool. Maybe it could have been used to create makeshift bombs, rather than only having one function. There is another example of this later on that removes metal vines from your path. Neither of these things I'm a big fan of, but they are for the most part unobstructive outside some smaller side content. And by the time you run into these things, you will usually have the key anyways. So anyway, once Aloy clears the rubble and makes her way in, she finds a nearly completely crumbled facility with only a few platforms left standing in the water. This makes the area into a really cool platforming puzzle, which takes Aloy all the way around the facility and makes use of nearly all the tools in her arsenal. One thing I liked about the platforming in Ghost of Tsushima is that it iterated on the boring climbing mechanics seen in Uncharted that have become so pervasive in gaming, and it took that and made it a little bit more interesting. Forbidden West takes that improvement and moves it up another 4 notches. Between the grappling hook allowing Aloy to latch on to hard-to-reach places or pull down new platforms to climb on, as well as the new energy glider which lets her jump to lower but further platforms, the climbing is actually really engaging in a lot of areas in this game. It turns from a chore into a puzzle, which is awesome. So after spider monkeying all the way around the facility and eventually reaching the door at the end of the big room, Aloy finds a real copy of Gaia. Finally. Only he warns Aloy at the last minute that people are coming into the facility and that she should give up Gaia and that they probably won't kill her. The people that show up are bathed in light and floating like angels, clearly of some advanced civilization giving their dope-ass outfits. But with how pointed the line about the Far Zenith ship was in the first mission, I immediately connected the dots. Regardless, something I wasn't expecting was another clone of Elizabeth Sopek, just like Aloy. This new clone, named Beta, is working with the Zeniths, but something doesn't seem quite right. Regardless, when Beta accidentally reveals Aloy's presence, the Zeniths have no interest in showing mercy, despite what Silence said. Aloy gets into a fight with one of them, Eric, and barely escapes with her life, as they have some sort of shield technology that phases any attacks right through them. In order to escape, she sabotages the facility and falls down into a drain, then has to swim her way out of the facility, avoiding the Zenith's futuristic machines along the way. However, she was injured in the fight and passes out in the escape. This is the first time since she was a child that Aloy has shown any sort of physical weakness, at least any time that we've seen her. She was always brave and willing to go into any fight, no matter who or what she was facing. But finally, in a fight against an opponent as advanced as the Zeniths, she was hopelessly outmatched. No amount of strength she could muster alone could have helped her win. As disappointed as I was that there isn't so much an air of mystery in Forbidden West, there is a genuine sense of despair when thinking about the Zeniths. Their shields completely negate any weapons that you try to use in the fight, and not only do they have advanced weaponry and machines, they can fly and teleport to any position, and that fear followed me throughout the entire game. Every single main mission I completed hereafter, I was constantly paranoid that the Zeniths would swoop down and mess everything up again. That is good design. What isn't as good design is that it only really happens once at the end. I wish they would have been a little bit more present, but what are you gonna do? So one cool thing about Forbidden West compared to some other open world games is that every main mission is its own self-contained story. Of course, there is a connection between all of them, but each mission has Aloy dealing with a specific problem, and by the end of it, there is a resolution to said problem, good or bad. It's pretty cool because it means you can hop on the game for an hour or so, completing one of these missions and leave feeling satisfied, like you actually accomplished something. Part 3. Pick yourself up and try again. Or, getting on Minervas. Aloy wakes up in an outpost of the Utaru tribe, the only tribe that makes No Man's Land their home. The entire time Aloy was searching for Silence in Hades, Varl had been hot on her heels and eventually found her unconscious body washed up after her escape. He and an Utaru woman named Zoe took her back to this outpost and tended to her wounds. At first, Zoe is untrusting of Aloy, an outsider, but when one of her land gods, a plowhorn machine, is malfunctioning and dying, Aloy uses her focus to analyze the machine and fix the issue. Having seen this so-called miracle, Zoe tells Aloy that she knows of a control center, which they deduce is where Minerva, one of Gaia's subfunctions, has been hiding. This control center is quite a long distance away, situated in the mountains that separate No Man's Land from Tenakth territory. I believe these are supposed to be the Rockies, actually. Aloy tries to leave immediately, but is clearly wounded and can barely stand up, let alone go on a long journey. Again, this is a first for the series, clearly broadcasting the fact that Aloy, this seemingly supernaturally strong warrior woman that we have spent dozens of hours with, is in fact still human. She agrees to rest for a bit and then meet up with Zoe and Varl in Plainsong, the Utaru capital, to set out together for the control center. Plainsong rests in a fertile valley in what looks to be old-world satellite dishes. At this point, I want to acknowledge Guerrilla Games for making each tribe unique. This is something that Zero Dawn did really well also, but it carried forward to Forbidden West. The Utaru in particular are the most peaceful tribe that Aloy meets in the game, as they believe in living in harmony with nature to be important, even taken to a literal degree with literal musical harmony. And to them, the machines are included in what they see as nature. Plowhorns can be seen outside the city proper tending to the fields, which in years past had provided the tribe with bountiful harvests. That type of power to give such an important resource, seemingly magically, caused the Utaru to see the Plowhorns as their gods and their musical noises as hymns. Every time you enter Plainsong, a chorus of singers can be heard building up to a crescendo, which gives the city this ethereal, floaty feel. It is truly awe-inspiring the first time Aloy visits. Fun fact, the word Plainsong, or plain chant, actually refers to the old Catholic Church chants used in liturgies. The Utaru's entire culture is built around songs. Isn't that so neat? Also at Plainsong, or perhaps before, you might discover the game of Machine Strike. Actually, I found it back in Chainscrape, but there wasn't really a better time to place this part, so here we are. Anyways, this game is kind of like Forbidden West's own version of Gwent. Machine Strike is quite a bit more complex than Gwent though, if not quite as addicting. It kind of reminds me of chess, except rather than having a static set of pieces, the player can build their own sets using pieces that resemble the machines found in the game. Each of the machine pieces has their own attributes: HP, armor, movement, capabilities, and even a few special passive effects. For example, some machines can attack from a few spaces away, while others only from long distances. Similarly, some pieces pull the enemy towards them while others knock pieces back, damaging the pieces behind them. Like I said, pretty complex. To add to all of that, the board itself varies, with spaces that resemble different types of terrain. The higher the ground type, the more an attack bonus the pieces get when they're on that spot. The extremely low terrain spaces even take a damage penalty. There's so much more to it than that though, and there's a pretty steep learning curve when playing it. I wasn't so much addicted to playing Machine Strike as I was Gwent, but it was definitely a fun, well-crafted game. I think the main problem with it is that there are just too few people to play with. In The Witcher 3, damn near every vendor, leader, innkeep, etc. will play with you, whereas in Forbidden West, there's only one strike player at most in each city. The other issue, to a lesser degree, is that there really isn't much of a tangible benefit to playing the game, only more strike pieces and a small amount of machine scrap. So, okay. At Plainsong, Zoe begs the Council of Utaru Elders to grant them permission to go to this control center, as Aloy may be able to help them regain their bountiful harvests of old, seeing as how the current rotted fields surrounding the city was caused by the failure of the terraforming systems, i.e. the lack of Gaia. However, due to the Utaru philosophy of being like a leaf on the wind, the council rejects her offer, opting instead to do nothing and die. Sharp as a tack, these councilmen. But at that very moment, Plainsong is attacked by rampaging machines. In the midst of the chaos and burning fields, Aloy and her companions manage to make it out and finally head towards the control center and Minerva. Once there, Aloy has to traverse a broken labyrinth of dilapidated technology, but is eventually successful in finding Minerva's heart. She uses the subfunction to finally reboot Gaia. After all this time, she had finally restored the planet's hope for survival. Except, there's a hitch. Which, I mean, yeah, it's only like 15-20 hours into the game. Couldn't be that easy, right? The newly restored Gaia changes the entire game, in a way. She reveals a bunch of information to Aloy. First and foremost, she isn't really able to do much in her current state, as the removal of all her sub-functions basically crippled her terraforming capabilities. The sub-functions are the ones that actually do things. Hephaestus creates machines. Minerva was the one responsible for deactivating the Pharaoh nanomachine swarm. Demeter is in charge of restoring the world's flora. Poseidon governs water intake, etc. So until Aloy is able to find the remaining subfunctions, the ones not lost or destroyed, and reunite them with Gaia, nothing can be done to reverse the slowly deteriorating biosphere. To add to that, Hephaestus, it seems, just like Hades before it, has gone somewhat rogue. So Aloy has to find the others first to power up Gaia in preparation to take him too. Bright side is, now Aloy has a base, and a team. The control center that Minerva was housed in acts as a sort of operations center for Aloy's crew, where they learn more about the world, the machines, and the subfunctions to assist Aloy. They all even have their own focuses now. Or is it foci? Gaia also reveals to Aloy that the mysterious signal that sets the events preceding the first game into motion actually came from off-world, specifically from the Sirius system, which was the destination of the Zenith colony, if you remember. To be honest, with how hard they had been pushing the Zeniths up to that point, It was kind of obvious that that was what they were setting up. But whoo boy, was I not expecting the weird-ass twist at the end of the game. Up to now, as we've seen, Aloy has been fighting against involving others in her journey, but after the disastrous first encounter with the Zeniths, she has begun to soften on the matter. This is the main inner conflict of the game. Aloy has to learn to fully trust others with her problems, trust in their capabilities and not just her own, and in doing so create the family, the tribe that she had always wanted since she was a child. In this new team dynamic, each of the members takes on new roles. Zoe becomes a sort of woman in the chair, staying at the base to learn everything she can, as, up to this point, she thought the machines were magical gods. Her whole world came crashing down in front of her, but she took it like a champ. Varl goes off to bring Erend from the Karja territory so that he can help in the effort as well. Meanwhile, Aloy heads into the Forbidden West to gather the 3 sub-functions, Aether, Demeter, and Poseidon, and bring them back to merge with Gaia. Part 4. Welcome to the Jungle, or Probing the Aether. At this point in the game, the player has most likely gained quite a few levels and skill points, so let's delve in a bit into the skill tree. Just like Zero Dawn, there are multiple trees that correspond to different types of skill. However, just like everything else in this game, the skill trees are bigger, more complex, and just better. Aloy can choose from skills that make her a more efficient spear fighter, better at ranged combat, stealth moves, trapping and potion crafting, machine overriding, and more. The skill trees are more like skill webs though, where learning one skill leads to another, but the player can go a different route and end up circling back around. The basic skills around the tree give Aloy passive benefits like better efficiencies, more consumable slots, etc. And all of them are tiered from lower to higher level, while each tier focuses around a sort of ultimate ability called Valor Surges. These Valor Surges are new to Forbidden West, and there are quite a few of them. They range from giving a large bonus to bow damage for a time, chaining damage between enemies, granting a temporary overshield, which is what one of the legendary armor pieces from the original did, or even just increasing the efficiency of breaking machine parts. They aren't really game-breaking or overpowered, but they are a nice addition to give combat even more depth than it already had. In addition, there are weapon skills that can be learned which are specific to a single type of weapon. Some examples of these are notching multiple arrows at a time in your bow, making the bomb sling shoot sticky bombs, or the ability to shoot out tripwire in a single quick trigger pull, which is awesome for mid-combat trap laying, something that was nigh impossible in Zero Dawn. The amount of variety is frankly staggering. However, while the choice on which skill to choose can be paralyzing, especially for someone like me who freezes up at the drink fountain, skill points are given out very generously on completion of a variety of small and large tasks, in addition to level ups. Actually, by the end of the game, it is easily possible for the player to have unlocked every single node. Now, I've seen criticism leveled at this type of progression system, claiming that it makes the decisions less meaningful because every player will have the exact same Aloy at the end of the game. My opinion is, firstly, Aloy is Aloy. She isn't a player insert and thus shouldn't vary wildly between different players' playthroughs. But even with that, the choice of which Valor Surges to use alone will absolutely vary from player to player and change the way they play. It all depends on what they value in combat, which gives plenty of room for players to express themselves in their builds. Upgrading the warrior tree gives a huge boost to the complexity of melee combat specifically. In addition to the light, heavy, and charge attacks, Aloy gets access to multiple combos. Each of these have different uses, mainly to break the enemy's guard or lay down large amounts of damage and keep the enemy on their heels. My favorite, though, is a move where Aloy bounds in with a light attack, then switches to a charged one that causes Aloy to use the enemy's body as a springboard to backflip into the air, and then, while mid-flip, aim her bow, causing time to slow for a shot mid-air. So freaking cool. Even though these moves use only a few different buttons and there aren't a huge number of them, their addition makes combat feel less like button mashing and more like intentional fighting that requires situational awareness. Anyways, once exiting the base, Aloy is officially in Tenakth territory, the true Forbidden West. At this point, the game opens up even more than before, as it is left up to the player which of the sub-functions they go after first. Aether was my first target, so that's where I'll begin. However, Ether is located deep in Tenakth lowland territory, literally housed under the Capitol building of the Tenakth, so it's quite a trek to get there, and there is a lot of game in between. Most likely, the first settlement Aloy will happen upon is the home of the Tenakth Desert Clan. Though their story doesn't tie very much into the main plot of the game, there are some really interesting quests to be found there. The Desert Clan, as it turns out, is going through some really tough times. Specifically, their main source of water has dried up, and shipments from outside have all but stopped. It's a huge issue that becomes a through line for almost every quest in the area, in a similar way that we saw back in Chainscrape. In actuality, though, it's a kind of through line for the entire game, as it's all just an extreme look at what man-made climate change could look like. One quest in particular sends you to a northern settlement, which for some reason has been completely sunk underwater. They have the exact opposite problem as the rest of the Desert Clan, but they can't really do anything to help their southern neighbors as they're literally trying to just stay afloat. Aloy has to help rescue people that were stranded in the flood, which apparently happened extremely quickly. Another quest has Aloy helping a man who very openly and very vocally dislikes the commander of the Desert Clan. He plans to take down a giant machine called a Thunderjaw so that he can salvage the heart to buy water for the tribe, since he sees the commander as doing nothing to help the situation. Running parallel to that, you can do a similar quest with the commander herself to try finding out why their well has run dry, following the underground pipes all the way to their source and realizing that it was sabotage, though possibly due to ignorance rather than malice. All of these quests build up to a crescendo when the rebellious man challenges the commander for the right to rule, which puts the entire tribe in jeopardy due to their own internal politics governing how such challenges work. At that point, Aloy and the player are forced to choose between the two sides, literally deciding who lives and who dies. And that was a really tough choice for me, because each of their quests not only humanized the characters very well, but also effectively made me understand their side of the argument. There isn't a clear decision to be made, but Aloy has to make one. There is no third option. The tribe hangs in the balance. I chose the commander's side, because I thought disrupting leadership in such a tumultuous time was a recipe for disaster. But when all was said and done and the man lay on the desert ground dead, I did not feel great about the decision. I don't think I would have either way. And damn, it's been a while since a major AAA game has cornered me into such a situation and left me with such a huge pit in my stomach. Can you see why I love this game's side quests now? This had nothing to do with the main story, but still, it had such an awesome, rich narrative both through dialogue and in gameplay itself. Absolutely wonderful design. While trekking through the desert, my Aloy found, or more accurately, was nearly run over by a couple of Tenakth youths riding machines, apparently racing each other. This is yet another side game which Aloy can take part in if she follows the riders to the finish line. Unlike the races in Witcher 3 and most other open-world games, which are boring as hell and really hard to lose, the ones here are actually a lot of fun. That's mainly because they aren't simple races. The players can use their spears to knock contestants off their mounts, or use different types of arrows to stun them. Aloy can be stunned herself and has to rearrange herself back on her mount to get back into the race. So it's basically like Robot Horse Mario Kart, which is the most awesome sentence in this entire video. I won't talk too much about it because the races are pretty self-explanatory, but again, I am just flabbergasted that Guerrilla only took 4 years to make this game, given all the intricate, myriad subgames and everything else I've talked about. Eventually though, Aloy makes it to the capital of the Tenakth, housed in an old museum and overrun by the jungle which has grown up around it. This is the seat of Chief Hikaru, who rules over all 3 clans and their commanders. The jungle portion of the Zero Dawn map was my favorite because of how beautiful, lush, and, well, moist it all looked. But Guerrilla Games said, hold my beer, and just up the quality here to the nth degree. Holy shit, is the flora gorgeous. Everything feels so alive and dense and just wild. The waterfalls are especially choice in these areas because the surroundings are already pretty, but the improved water physics moving through them are just icing on the cake. I'll talk more about this later. Here's a weird tangent. I get why people say Elden Ring is a beautiful game. It absolutely is, and From Software should be proud of what they created. I put over 170 hours into that game, which is more than I put into Horizon, and I really enjoyed myself. The art design is off the charts, but, at the same time, on a technical level, the graphics aren't that much better than Dark Souls 3, and it doesn't really look like a current-gen game. In fact, they're still using the same outdated engine that they've been using for a while. Just look at Bluepoint's Demon Souls remake to see what a modernized Souls game could look like. For my own money, I prefer the style of Horizon, which gives a much more grounded take while upgrading the fidelity in a way I have not seen done before. Just my opinion, and everyone is welcome to their own, but I was just flabbergasted at all the hype Elden Ring's visuals were getting, while hearing relatively little about the fantastic look of Forbidden West. Within the ancient museum that is now a capital are degraded hologram terminals which discuss the exploits of a group of soldiers known as the Tin, hence Tinakth. This is where they got their name. Not sure what the Okth means though. In my previous encounters with the Tinakth, I had heard them praising the Tin and wondered what that meant. Apparently they revere those ancient warriors and have modeled their society after them. I found it very interesting picking up all the details of things adopted from their role models. For example, the Tinakth salute is the same exact salute that modern United States military uses. There's quite a few of these for the eagle-eyed player. Details like these, or the Ataru and their singing, really make the tribes feel genuine, like they're real people living in a dead world, picking up little bits of knowledge and incorporating them into their own societies. And each of the tribes in Forbidden West are like this. They all have their own detailed characteristics derived from things they picked up along the way, which have evolved over time into a fully fledged culture. So Aloy meets Chief Hikaru, who surprisingly tells her that he knows about Ether, and even knows where to find it, right underneath his throne. The catch is, he will only let her down there if she helps him with Regala's rebels first. Remember them? Well, it turns out that the chief is holding a ceremony called the Cool Root, replacing the ones that died in the parley before. Basically, these marshals are extensions of Hikaru's will that act on his behalf and keep the various commanders of the different clans in check. But they are expecting Regala to use the Cool Root as a chance to attack. At first, Hikaru just tries to make Aloy a marshal straight off the bat, but she refuses. So instead, he asks her help to defend the Cool Root. Additionally, the commander of the Sky Clan is just a giant douche and is refusing to send contestants to the Cool Root because, well, I mean, he's a douche. No, the real reason is that he wants Hikaru's throne and believes that he is safe holed up in his fortress village. Regardless, Hikaru sends Aloy up there to light a fire under the commander's ass, which admittedly she may have taken a little too literally. The next part of the game has some really great moments of representation, so I want to explicitly acknowledge them. First off, Kotalo, another marshal that grew up in the Sky Clan, assists Aloy in convincing them to send their dang members to the Cool Root. Except Kotalo lost an arm in a recent conflict, which to the Sky Clan makes him a lesser man. But the game itself never shows him as being limited or less than, which is fantastic. In fact, anytime Aloy has to climb a cliff or fight a machine, Kotalo is right next to her, keeping pace. I do have one complaint about the way they handle Kotalo later in the game though. Aloy can eventually go on a side quest with him to help him build a mechanical arm, which is great. Except afterwards, you never see the new arm in cutscenes. It makes it feel like this awesome moment for the character never even happened. It's just kind of weird seeing how the game renders cutscenes with Aloy wearing whatever armor. So it doesn't seem like it would have been an issue to show Kotalo's arm if you did the quest, but whatever. Aloy and Kotalo fail to convince the commander to send members to the Cool Root at first. However, upon inspecting the massive wall that makes the village a fortress called the Bulwark, she discovers an old-world tank that could be blown up given the proper force. For instance, a shot from a machine cannon. So to get such a weapon, the two take down a rebel base that is in the process of preparing a Tremor Tusk as a siege engine, which involves taking down both the massive Tremor Tusk and all the rebels. This fight killed me so much. I was playing on hard, the second highest difficulty, which I usually find to be the sweet spot for myself, and holy cow, if you plotted the difficulty curve of this game, then up to this point it would have been a nice gentle curve, and then whoosh, off the fucking scale. This thing can easily one-shot you from a distance with multiple different attacks, has a shit ton of health, and is surrounded by rebel soldiers that aren't super dangerous but can easily distract you long enough to miss the flying flame boulder hurtling straight towards your face. It was so goddamn difficult. But, I actually enjoyed that. Like, the reason I love Dark Souls games is because of that feeling after failing a boss 20, 30 times before finally succeeding. That feeling when you finally meet the challenge by raising your own skills just enough to win out. I know, I'm so unique. But yeah, I totally got that feeling from not only this boss, but many of the harder, bigger enemies in the game. I wouldn't call Horizon a Souls-like by any stretch, but it can definitely scratch that itch in certain moments if you crank up the difficulty. Anyways, the other cool point of representation came as kind of a surprise to me because of how it's set up. One of the side quests Aloy can do up in the SkyClan territory has her rescuing a younger man from a blizzard. The boy was attempting to complete a sort of rite of passage, a trial that involves climbing a mountain and obtaining a flower that only grows there. On her way to him, she runs into the other contestants and other tribe members who all doubt his capabilities. They all see him as weak, and when Aloy finally makes it to the kid, he refuses to come down. He's determined to prove them wrong, and since Aloy was in this exact situation once herself, back at the very beginning of the first game, she agrees to summit the mountain with him and aid in his trial. Now, how is that good representation, you might be asking? Well, after successfully completing the trial, while talking to his friends, the kid makes a somewhat suggestive comment towards another guy.
He's cute.
Go on, I'll catch up.
Implying that he is, in fact, gay. It's also implied that the kid's sexuality was the reason he was looked down upon by the rest of the tribe, or at least had something to do with it. But you had already spent time with him where he proves himself before his sexuality is revealed, showing that it really doesn't matter. It has no bearing on anyone's strength as an individual. Also, I got this gorgeous shot of the moon reflecting off the snow at night, and damn, just look at that. I'm gonna shut up for a second so we can all just appreciate how pretty this game is. So after taking out the rebel camp and yoinking the Trimmertusk's laser cannon, Aloy and Kotallo blow up the tank inside the bulwark. They did all this to show the commander that he couldn't just hide behind the wall forever. But, now the SkyClan is just left completely defenseless. I thought it was a bit weird, but it did work in the end, I guess, and we got this awesome exchange out of it.
I'm not getting dragged further into this madness.
Hikaru ordered you to help me. You gonna defy him like that arrogant shit up there?
That was an unkind comparison.
With the SkyClan commander finally agreeing to send members to the cool route, the ceremony could finally begin. And sure enough, Regalla uses the opportunity to attack Hikaru, which is a pretty awesome battle. Aloy gets a bird's eye view and basically infinite scavenged machine weapons to rain hellfire back on the rebels. However, the defense is not enough to keep out a freaking Slitherfang. Aloy is forced to fight this thing basically one-on-one, and this time it isn't pinned down. Finally though, when all is said and done, Hikaru allows Aloy to access Aether's chamber, and Aloy recovers the sub-function. 1 down, 2, plus 1 to go. So the area that Aloy faced the Slitherfang, which is the same area where the cool route took place, is called the Arena. And after completing this quest, as well as a short side quest, the Arena opens up as yet another side game mode. The Arena has a bunch of different challenges for the player to complete, all sectioned off into difficulty tiers, with each tier having a capstone of a tough, large enemy. These challenges are tough as it is, but they're also timed, which makes them kind of insane in some cases. They all pit Aloy against different machines according to a given theme. For example, an early one is just a bunch of different elemental clawstriders and some burrowers that Aloy must take out in time. To complete them in time requires not only skill, but tons of strategy, using the proper weapons, understanding weak points, and taking advantage of traps that are sometimes set out for you in the environment. So in other words, it is the ultimate challenge that tests the skills that the player has been learning over the course of the entire game. And the rewards are not something to sneeze at either. Finishing each challenge in the allotted time awards the player with medals, and when enough are accumulated, they can be traded in for legendary gear. In fact, the arena is one of the only sources to get such rare gear, and the only source for some of the specific items, all of which are really sweet. Overall, the arena is quite a bit of fun and a great challenge, but ultimately one that I never finished because it's so damn hard. I guess I could have just lowered the difficulty, but since I brought up the legendary armor, I want to talk a little bit about some other armor types Aloy can get in the game, as well as upgrading. There are way more variants than in Zero Dawn. As with that game, these armor types, as well as weapon types, are separated by typical RPG rarity: uncommon, rare, very rare, and legendary. Each specific armor set comes with one or more perks, with the higher rarities having more of said perks. These are similar to some of the passive effects gained from upgrading the skill trees, and synergize with those as well. For instance, with the base early game stats, Aloy can only lay 3 traps at a time, but by upgrading the skill tree and wearing the right upgraded armor, that can be increased to 6, which is double. The legendary pieces of armor specifically have 4 to 5 different perks that can be activated, which give a huge bonus, and each piece is themed to make Aloy an expert in one field. Now, not all of these perks are initially active when you first buy the set. In order to maximize the armor's effectiveness and open up available mod slots, Aloy has to upgrade the set at the nearest workbench. This is one of the few things that I think takes a step back from the original game. As in Zero Dawn, all upgrades could be made in the menu from anywhere, as long as Aloy had the right components. The last part still works the same though, as different machine components are still required to upgrade both armor and weapons. Only now, there are even more upgrade levels and more benefits, meaning you'll want Aloy to start scrounging for parts early, which in turn makes combat even more cerebral, because you're not only considering weak points, but also preserving and not damaging specific parts to make sure they're still there when the machine dies. Another thing, and it's a small thing comparatively, but it's pretty cool that Aloy can now dye each of the armor sets, with each one getting a number of different color options, so the player can make sure that Aloy is always looking stylish. Though if you want that, you should just disregard the Utaru armor sets. Doesn't matter what color they are or how good their perks are, those things are ugly as fuck. Part 5. My bias is beta, or the elusive Eleuthia. After retrieving Ether and returning back to the base with Katalo, who becomes the latest member of the team, Gaia informs Aloy that she has received a signal from Eleuthia, one of the sub-functions that was thought lost. Erend and Varl agree to go with Aloy to investigate the signal, aware that it might be a trap laid by the Zeniths, which again, I was paranoid about the entire game.
Look at us, 3 battle-hardened badasses forging into the unknown. This ought to be good.
When Aloy and Co arrive at the source, there's a cutscene showing a Zenith member actually being taken out by some of Regalla's rebels and some unknown Oseram forces. Somehow, they had crafted a weapon that bypassed the Zenith's futuristic shields. No time for that though, the signal was coming from deep within a mountain, which has a giant hole bored into it by some sort of laser. Remember in Alien vs. Predator when they find the hole in the Antarctic ice? Basically that. Aloy and Varl trek down into the bore and access the station's terminal, only to find Beta, the other clone of Elizabeth, just like Aloy. She had somehow escaped the Zenith's control, hidden herself within the base, and sent out a distress signal pretending to be Eleuthia. She tells Aloy that the Zeniths are planning to completely re-terraform Earth, wiping out all of the human tribes and starting from scratch. She also reveals that the Zeniths aren't the descendants of the people that left Earth all those centuries ago, but are, in fact, the very same people. They had somehow learned of a way to extend their lifespan indefinitely. In her escape, Beta had managed to swipe the Zenith's copy of Gaia, which severely hampers their ability of carrying out the plan. Only the Zeniths were hot on Beta's trail, which is why one of them was up on top of the mountain. But she wasn't alone, because right as Beta gets rescued, 2 of the Zenith's futuristic machines, called Spectres, attack the trio. For their size, which is not much bigger than the average Claw Strider, these guys pack a mean punch and are quick as hell. Add to that their unique attacks, which make them feel much more futuristic, and the result is an intimidating foe. So after wiping the floor with said intimidating foe, the group returns to the base with Beta, making her yet another new member of the team. She warns them that the Zeniths are unfathomably advanced and dangerous, duh, and that it is only a matter of time before they accomplish their goals, which should have really lit a fire under Aloy's ass, but I enjoy running the ruin challenges and picking up plants too much to be hurried. Part 6, Under the Sandsea, or some pun that I couldn't think of with Poseidon. So Poseidon is the next subfunction that I found. When Gaia died all those years ago, he retreated to somewhere within the ruins of Las Vegas, which was overtaken by the desert sands. Traveling south to find him leaves me in awe. I've never before seen sand dunes expressed so beautifully in a game, which is something I'm going to be saying a lot. So soft and fluffy, with the top wispy layer constantly being picked up by the wind and swirling around. It's just, gorgeous. On my way south, I ran into a tallneck, which gives me a totally not contrived opportunity to talk about these guys. They are a returning feature from Zero Dawn and serve as these giant walking map dispensers in the body of an enormous, with a capital E, machines. In the first game, Aloy would find many of them roaming around the map, and most of them only required her to find a high point to hop onto their backs. There were also a couple that had more complex tasks associated, but just like with everything else, Forbidden West kicks that up a notch, or 5. Every tallneck in this game is unique and has its own associated quest to override. For the one I found near the ruins of Las Vegas, I saw some nearby mountains and had the bright idea to climb up them and then glide down to the tallneck's head. Solid plan, right? Well, I thought so too, but if you follow me on Twitter, then you saw the result of that attempt. It was not pretty.
There we go.
Side note, follow me on Twitter. Sometimes I post things. Turns out that this particular tallneck had been attacked and damaged by Oseram raiders, so Aloy has to repair it before overriding. The raiders were taken by surprise by other machines and killed before getting the chance to take the big guy down. Because of that, their ballistas are still there, which Aloy has to use to weigh down the tallneck, causing it to fall over. This was such a cool little mechanic, and it's only used this one time in the game. So anyways, Las Vegas looks exactly like you'd expect. All dried out, mostly covered over by the ever-shifting sands of time and just, regular sand. But after searching the city, Aloy eventually finds a single building that is sitting in a puddle, which is odd. But considering the name of the subfunction she's looking for, Poseidon, it seems like a decent bet. Inside the building, Aloy meets 3 Oseram scavengers, one of which is annoying as all hell, another speaks only as if he were narrating a Shakespearean play.
So the visionary's fate hung in the balance. Would he choose life or succumb to deadly delusion?
Which is also annoying. And the third is just a really enthusiastic engineer named Morland. My boy Morland is looking to scavenge treasures that his grandfather once showed him, called embers, all of which are beneath the sands in a completely flooded complex that extends below the building and all the way around Las Vegas. He built a submersible to get down there, but it couldn't take him far enough and nearly caused him to drown, which is how we found them. He and Aloy have this really cute little moment where they nerd out and brainstorm a device that would allow her to get all the way under the water to find both the treasures and Poseidon.
It'd have to be portable, though. Machine kneecap, maybe?
Well, you'd need a filter.
Synthetic membrane would do it. With a hose to a compressed
air capsule, hammer and tongs.
What is this? What is happening here? What? Get over here.
So up until this point, the diving mechanic, while fun, was a bit limited by this one pesky little thing that all humans need, namely oxygen. Having to surface all the time is a bit annoying, if understandable, but with this new mask, Aloy can stay underwater indefinitely, and it makes this water level pull off the impossible. It's actually fun. Deep below the sands of Las Vegas lies an enormous complex absolutely lousy with water, completely flooded, only it's lit up like the 4th of July, exactly like you'd expect a futuristic Las Vegas strip would look, and you get to swim through it with schools of fish and plant life, both real and hologram, filling out the scene. To top it off, there are swimming machines to avoid, as underwater combat is unfortunately not possible in the game. It is absolutely gorgeous to look at. One of the machines Aloy has to swim past at first is the sort of boss of the area. If you swim up to it, you'll get an option to talk before the fight, and the machine asks you,
I need about 350.
What's tree fitty?
But seriously, after swimming through the complex and eventually draining it, this Nessie-looking motherfucker is right between you and the door to Poseidon, so fight it Aloy must. This one wasn't quite as tough as the Trimmer Tusk, but it proves to be pretty damn annoying, shooting out jets of scalding water like a damn spinner sprinkler. Just like with any machine, there are a number of ways to tackle the problem. I chose to target the sacks that hold the water and explode those, making it unable to use said attacks. But a player could choose to lay down traps first to stagger the machine, or target the sparkers on its back to cause an electrical explosion, temporarily paralyzing it and allowing for heavy spear attacks. The options are nigh endless, and that's what makes the combat in this game so damn engaging. Anyways, once defeated, Aloy is able to recover Poseidon, as well as the Embers for Moorland, which end up being really awesome. The Oseram engineer uses them to light up the Las Vegas Strip, planning on making it a destination once again. And you can actually see this happen in-game. The next time I traveled back to the Oseram trio, the building had become this sprawling little community, complete with vendors and the like. The strip itself absolutely glows at night with all sorts of holograms made by the Embers, all of which can be changed by finding ornaments from around the world. Which is a great segue to talk about all the different ruins Aloy can find while she's exploring. These are exactly what they sound like, and they contain various treasures as well as a unique ornament inside each one. The ruins are all basically platforming puzzles, and they are an absolutely fantastic addition to the game. They kind of remind me of the shrines in Breath of the Wild. Each one is unique and has its own mechanics, and as you progress further into the game, they become more difficult, building on some of the mechanics from the earlier ones. For example, one of the first ruins I found introduced these crates that Aloy can pull on with the pullcaster, or just directly push around. They are mainly used to get to higher places that she can't jump to unaided. But within the next ruin I found, there was again a crate, but I couldn't figure out what to do with it at first. To progress, I needed to put a battery in a slot on the opposite side of the room from where it sat. The only problem was that, in between the two was waist-deep water that would discharge the battery anytime I tried to take it across. I was stumped for a while, until I thought, on a whim, maybe I can put the battery on top of the crate and push it across. I fully didn't expect this to work, but sure enough, that was the solution, and the battery stays nicely on top of it until you get to the other side. Realizing that these various mechanics work together that way was awesome, and opened up my mind to other possibilities for the rest of the ruins, things that I might not have even tried before. I liken this to the first realization of how to make fire with wood and flint in Breath of the Wild. That sort of interplay of mechanics allowing your mind to open up to even more possibilities and interactions is one of the best things in all of gaming. After that experience, I sought out every ruin, doing them as soon as I came across them. Main quest be damned, because they were that fun. And the reward for completing all of them isn't anything to sniff at either. A legendary shredder. Remember that Beyblade-style new weapon archetype I talked about? Pretty cool stuff. Part 7. From Across the Ocean. Or, if it isn't a yard, then it's Demeter. Don't at me about my chapter titles. They're not stupid, you're stupid. Anyway, with Poseidon and Ether down, Aloy has to find the last of the three, Demeter. According to Gaia, it is located just outside the ruins of San Francisco, deep into Noct territory. Going out there means traveling west from the capital, heading towards the coast, and then trekking up through the redwood forest, which all looks incredible. But if the forest looks incredible, then the California coast is downright magical. In fact, it was the location I was most looking forward to visiting after watching the trailers over and over again. I honestly cannot properly convey how awestruck I was when I first saw and swam through the ocean. I was so dumbfounded by how realistic it looked that I literally just sat there on the beach for a good 30 minutes watching the waves crash in. I tried telling my friends how awesome it is, but they tend to not get as excited at things as I do. It drove me crazy. I felt like shaking them and forcing them to look at the absolute majesty of the water so that they could share my reaction. But it didn't happen. So instead, I think I need to take a moment to fully get my feelings out on this because I really need someone to understand. So one of the things that I like to do in games that have large bodies of water is to look at them from a high point to see if I can spot the patterns in the waves. Don't ask why, I'm just weird. Maybe it has something to do with spending a lot of my childhood weekends on a boat, meaning I'm very familiar with how a body of water is supposed to look. Maybe I'm oceanosexual, or maybe it's Maybelline. Who knows? Who cares? Point is, in a lot of older games, and honestly still in most newer ones, the ocean viewed from afar looks like a grid, like wave patterns were just copied and pasted, or a simple texture just slapped on. To me, it looks bad. So I really appreciate games that break up the pattern and make it more chaotic or random, or better yet, dynamic and changing. You know, like real water. I praised Ghost of Tsushima for doing this, and Elden Ring as well looks pretty nice from afar. But in those games, it's still fairly static, or at least the waves are just obvious repeating patterns. But Forbidden West? No sir, no ma'am, no my NB friends. It is completely realistic. From afar, you can see the waves moving, crashing into each other, making white foam and spray, and there really isn't any apparent pattern, at least none that I can find. When swimming far out, away from the coast, the waves are tall and terrifying with rough textures as the wind is causing them to form smaller and smaller details that roughen up the smooth wave surface, what are known as whitecaps. It is, for lack of a better term, exactly what real water looks like. And as the waves come crashing into the beach, you can see the full wavefront from 100 or so yards out, building slowly and eventually crashing in, folding over itself and causing white spray to fly out. Again, just like real waves. You can see the light pass through them and get refracted. From underneath the water, you can see the surface deformation as it passes overhead. It's just so incredible. And as odd as it may seem, this might be my favorite thing in the game, and that is saying a lot. Like I said, I'm weird. So after drooling over the water, I finally got back to the story, in which Aloy finds the building Demeter was housed in. But as she draws near, she's attacked by mysterious warriors in white uniforms. For those of you familiar with Final Fantasy VIII, or at least my video on it, they looked a lot like the White Seed mercenaries. Regardless, these guys don't look anything like anyone else Aloy has fought up to that point, but she takes them out nonetheless. However, upon entering Demeter's building and after being attacked again, Aloy finds a member of the tribe that isn't actually a fighter, and more importantly, willing to talk. Interestingly, this woman, Alva, is wearing a focus. The same device that lets Aloy interact with the ancient technology, albeit an older version. She tells Aloy that the people who attacked her, and Alva herself, are a part of the Quinn tribe, who came from across the sea on huge catamaran ships in search of a way to stop their home from collapsing. Which of course makes sense because the biosphere degradation would be happening there too. Alva agrees to help Aloy after hearing her plans, and the two manage to capture Demeter, but not before having to take out a new awesome machine, which is like a giant metal bat that can go invisible and shoot venom and shit. I know, my prose is extremely flowery and poetic. I'm basically a new fucking Hemingway, right? Speaking of flowers, it's revealed that the metal flowers that could be found both in Zero Dawn and in this game were actually delivery devices meant to spread the metal vines that you might have seen around the world. Yet another one of those key mechanisms that I'm not super fond about. Called adamantine wreath, these flowers were meant to somehow gum up the nanomachine's biomatter conversion process. The machine bats were built to distribute these flowers all around the world and hopefully stop the apocalypse. However, they didn't get it working in time, so the only thing they accomplished was stopping me from getting to some places. Still though, this cutscene was pretty gnarly.
What did we just see?
Part 8. Eat the Rich, or Pharaoh's Not a Pharaoh. Finally, with 3 of the 4 surviving subfunctions intact, Gaia is strong enough to take over Hephaestus. However, she informs the team, which now includes Alva, that they will need Ted Pharaoh's override code to make it work. If you don't remember Pharaoh, he was the guy that originally built the nanoswarm that ended up killing all of humanity all those centuries ago. Kind of a huge dick. All the information known about him suggests that Pharaoh survived the apocalypse in a bunker located somewhere under San Francisco, which is currently controlled by the Quinn. Just like the other tribes, the Quinn have their own defining characteristic. They were supposedly gifted their focuses a long time ago by some great ancestor, and therefore have a deep reverence of all things related to the ancients. Their expedition's team leader is called CEO, spelled just like CEO, and the hierarchy seems to be similar to that of a modern-day corporation, that is, an authoritarian regime. The Quinn most especially revere Ted Faro, and to a lesser degree Elizabeth Sobek, apparently unaware of Teddy Boy's involvement in the apocalypse. The reason being is that their older focuses don't allow them to access data past the early 2050s. In other words, they can't view any of the information on how the nanomachine swarm turned against humanity. For those reasons, when the Quinn are able to get a good look at Aloy, they immediately recognize her as a reincarnated ancient, which is actually not too far from the truth. Now, I can't not talk about this section and overlook discussing San Francisco. The scale is absolutely nuts, and Aloy is even able to climb a few of the skyscrapers, which gives her a bird's-eye view of the entire city, the bay, and even the remnants of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's absolutely gorgeous, especially because the city has been partially flooded, so these dilapidated, rusting superstructures are surrounded on all sides by this lush tropical flora and these crystal-clear ponds and rivers that snake their way alongside old roads and between the buildings. So after traveling to the Quinn settlement and speaking with CEO, he agrees to help Aloy find Ted's bunker to get the override, but only if she takes him inside with her. CEO seems to have an unhealthy obsession with Faro, and once Aloy unlocks the bunker, that obsession turns into full-on delusion. CEO reveals that he believes himself to be Ted Faro reborn, and that taking the bunker and all its data is his birthright. He forces Aloy to show him the way, and even makes her wear clothes that Elizabeth Sobek would have worn, for some weird reason. My guy is kinda nuts. So I was immediately creeped out from the moment I walked inside the bunker. It was stated before that Ted was a fan of ancient Egyptian civilization, but holy shit is the bunker just over the top. It's styled in the fashion of an Egyptian royal tomb, which, when you think about its purpose and its later fate, is morbid as all hell. Until that moment though, Ted's last name hadn't clicked with me. Pharaoh, like the Egyptian pharaoh. Not exactly subtle in retrospect. Throughout the bunker, text and audio data points can be found that paint the picture of what life was like inside the bunker in the years following the apocalypse. Ted had used his vast fortune as the world's richest man to not only ensure his own survival, but brought along a small cadre of people to surround him, basically sycophants, to feed his insatiable ego. That includes a full harem of women that he would cycle through, as well as a doctor that was tasked with creating a serum to make Ted immortal. If you haven't caught on yet, and I mean it's not exactly subtle, Horizon is very critical of the world's 1%, which, I mean, yeah. So things didn't go great for Teddy Boy, to say the least. Ted's ego grew, and it's implied that he even murdered a couple people along the way, not to mention the skull bombs. Dude went full Suicide Squad and inserted bombs inside the doctor's head and his daughter's head just to make sure the poor guy was trying his hardest to make this immortal serum. I promise there's a reason why I'm telling you about Ted's story, but beyond the practical point, it was just some really great world building. I was engrossed with uncovering the next bit of the puzzle in a way that I hadn't really been with the other data points in the game. In retrospect, saving for the bunker, that was one thing this game missed that its predecessor nailed. I hadn't really noticed because I was so engrossed with the rest of the game, but the data points in Zero Dawn really set the tone for the game, telling the stories of the lost souls living out their final days. After forcing Aloy to go further and further into the bunker to find, I don't know exactly what, I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments, Aloy was able to sneak away and access the facility's systems, getting the override that she needed. She also found something disturbing, right as CEO and his men were breaking into the room to get at her. Now, we don't get to see exactly what she saw, but it's heavily implied to be the malformed monstrosity that was once Ted Faro. His own ego had led him to continue taking the doctor's serum, even knowing that it would turn him into something no longer human, something abominable. Exactly what he looks like all these centuries later is left to our own imaginations, though we can guess that since the serum caused cancerous outgrowths, over time that would be nothing but like a giant living tumor. When CEO forces his way in and sees the monstrosity,
Is that?
It's him.
he orders his men to burn it, which sets off a chain reaction, destroying the bunker around them. In the chaos that ensues, Sio sends his men after Aloy and Alva, and in his attempt to escape, a giant bust of Ted Farrow's head breaks off and crushes Sio, which is just a perfect fucking end to this character. I actually laughed out loud when it happened. He was killed by the physical representation of the ego, the giant head of a man he worshipped and thought he actually was. Nice and tidy with a bow. Part 9, the one where Varl dies at the end. Or, hey girl, hey Festus. After getting the override code, Aloy returns to the base in preparation for the Hephaestus recovery mission. So since we're returning there anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this place because it's pretty dang cool. The base starts out as this mostly ruined ancient control center with only a few rooms and barely any working power. However, as Aloy recovers the sub-functions and powers up Gaia, more and more of the rooms can be accessed, more of the base's functionality gets revealed and is usable, and the ever-growing team turns it from a cold metal tomb into something alive and inviting. Most of it is aesthetic. A barracks room fills up with the belongings of the new members as they join the team, indicating that they've made it their home. Varl and Zoe have their own room and a single pallet, indicating the old brown chicken brown cow. However, some of the things that get unlocked have practical uses as well. For example, some of the machine overrides Aloy unlocks out in the world are corrupted, but they can be fixed at a machine in the base. There's also a workbench and stash so that Aloy can do much of her upgrades right at the base. She also has her own room that will exhibit some of the trinkets that she picks up along her journey. There are even secret tunnels that have goodies and allow Aloy to turn on more of the base lights and systems. The base feels alive at all times because all of these characters are in there, doing their jobs, chatting with each other, and otherwise just living. And there is an exhaustive amount of dialogue to learn more about the characters, and eventually even special character quests that can be done for each one of them. After returning to the base, Aloy has to talk to Beta, who is freaking the fuck out about the plan to take Hephaestus. I really haven't mentioned it up to now, but Beta has done this to some degree a couple of times before.
What if they take me back? Alone, in a cell again. Their slave. Forever.
She is understandably a very high-strung, emotionally unstable person, having literally been born and raised to fulfill a single function, and treated more than a tool as a person. Up to now, Aloy has been pretty aloof and dismissive with her, which is not a reaction she has had to anyone else on the team, despite the situation. There's clearly some tension there since, they are both clones of the same person. But now, after Beta confides in Aloy, telling her of her fear of once again becoming the Zenith slave, Aloy is finally able to relate. Beta asks her why they turned out so different. They are the exact same individual genetically, so how did Aloy turn out so strong and Beta so weak?
I looked through all the data from your focus. You were raised as an outcast, shunned, and isolated just like me, so what's the difference? What's my defect?
Aloy tells her that the main difference between them is the father figure that she had in Rost. He was there to raise her and love her in his own way, and with Aloy, that single nurturing figure made the difference. In this conversation, a dynamic between the two starts to form, that of two sisters, with Aloy the eldest. It's a genuinely touching moment, especially when you see Aloy decide, just through her reaction and body language, that she is going to be Beta's older sister, her own Rost in a way. And man, the voice acting and animations are absolutely fantastic in this scene. So Aloy, a woman who was raised to be a loner, taught by the world that she had to solve her problems by herself, was forced to rethink her entire worldview and accept help from friends. And now, she realizes that she has to accept family too, that she has to be that help for someone else. It's a fantastic character arc, and one that wasn't as present, or at least didn't sit in the forefront of Zero Dawn. The reason Beta was freaking out is that the plan they had worked on to capture Hephaestus required her to take part. They would need 2 access points, managed by Aloy and Beta each, to force Hephaestus back to Gaia. But doing so, Beta says, would be like a beacon to the Zeniths, and her worst fear is being taken by them again. Aloy is asking her to face her worst fear and put herself in the most dangerous situation possible, and she's asking that of a person who has virtually zero experience with anything, let alone this type of danger. So to combat that possibility, the rest of the team plans to each go to the various cauldrons around the region and create a sort of distraction, masking the work done by Beta and Aloy. And now, since I've even just said the word cauldron, I'm going to use it as an excuse to talk about them for a moment. Cauldrons are these massive machine facilities built underground, usually into the side of the mountain. They are the place where the magic happens, where machines are built and repaired, where a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff takes place. The cauldrons themselves were built by machines following Gaia's directive after humanity died out in the apocalypse. Because of that, it's clear that humans were never meant to go inside these places. If the ruins scattered about the world are like the Horizon equivalent of shrines from Breath of the Wild, then cauldrons are more akin to full-on dungeons. There are only a handful of them across the world, but they are massive and full of whirring, endlessly running machinery, with no clear paths to get from chamber to chamber. Often, Aloy will have to use the environment around her to make her own paths, climbing or grappling from ledge to ledge, overriding consoles to bridge gaps. They are also full of small machines to deter any adventurous humans from proceeding. The scale and detail of these places is downright breathtaking. Each one is unique, going back to the function that each one serves being slightly different. So those are the aesthetics, but the practical reality of playing in these spaces means that traversing them becomes its own puzzle, just like the ruins. They aren't super different from those found in the last game, which is fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But still, I think Guerrilla did just enough to make the cauldrons in Forbidden West a tad more unique. First of all, most of the cauldrons have been broken in some way. This goes back to some of the calamities seen around the map, like the huge flood up north, or the lack of water in the Desert Clan. Something large clearly went down in this area recently, some sort of geological calamity that cracked open these cauldrons and caused all those other problems. It's really cool to see the evidence of this everywhere and to try piecing together what exactly happened. One of them is just cracked right through, and Aloy has to descend in it through this break. Another has been submerged in the ocean, meaning she has to swim to get inside. That one in particular works kind of like a Zelda water temple, requiring the player to raise and lower the water level to get access to the different areas. Another cauldron was in the process of building a tall neck, but got stuck at some point. So traversing it not only means completing the cauldron, but completing the construction of the tall neck, allowing you to override it and unlock that part of the map. Finally, at the heart of these places usually lies a large machine of some sort. In Zero Dawn, this was almost always the same thing. The cauldron was building a sort of defender that Aloy could see and prepare for. But given the state of Forbidden West's cauldrons, that isn't always the case. Sometimes it's simply an intruder that made the central room its new home. So Aloy, Beta, and Varl all go to the Gemini cauldron to take on Hephaestus, and everything is going according to plan. They had to bring Gaia along, as she had to be present in the cauldron for reasons. Hephaestus tries to escape, but the team had expected that to happen. Aloy has to chase him through the cauldron, fighting the machines that the sub-function throws her way, and blocking all routes of egress to force it back into Gaia's metaphorical arms. One of these machines is a new one, called a slaughter spine. It's an absolute beast. This is the new big dog that takes the place of the Thunderjaw from the first game, though they still exist here too. Beta says that it takes a lot of energy to make one of these things, which makes sense because all of that goddamn plasma that it uses. It has tons of different plasma attacks using its tail and the eponymous spine on its back, and even charges itself up with the element to make those attacks even more powerful. These guys are rough, but so cool.
Aloy, look.
Though it was tough, the team takes care of the slaughter spine and the other machines, and they get Hephaestus all locked up and safe and sound, ready to— What the fuck? I knew it was going to fucking happen. I was right to be paranoid. Fuck!
Well, hello, redundant copy. You cost us quite a lot of time.
So, as you may have gathered, the Zeniths warp directly into the cauldron right in front of Aloy. Eric, the douchebag that attacked Aloy before, goes straight for Varl, impaling him through the stomach, and taking out my boy just like that, like crushing an ant. No! Now, I'm not gonna lie, I screamed at the fucking TV. It happened so fast. At the same time, the leader Gerard takes Gaia, and another one gets Beta. And just like that, everything Aloy had been building up to that point, her family, her hope, had been stripped away from her. Eric goes for Aloy next, but just before he can, one of them, the woman named Tilda, whisks her away for reasons unknown, right before she becomes a rather large shish kebab. Part 10. Learning to Fly. Or, Turncoat? More like, give me your coat, am I right? Please give me, I want it. Tilda takes Aloy to a bunker that she had created for herself, under her old home in San Francisco. Between her and Pharaoh, it kind of makes you wonder how many other tech CEOs made their doomsday bunkers under the city. How did they get permits for that? Is the city sitting on the equivalent of Swiss cheese? Regardless, she tells Aloy that she saved her life because she was once friends with, and perhaps more, Elizabeth, and that she never wanted to go along with the other Zenith's plan, but she had to bide her time. Back in the base, when Beta was talking to Aloy about her fears, she had mentioned that Tilda was the only one of the Zeniths that showed her any kindness. She said the woman let her explore a virtual library full of paintings and literature. So I was almost ready to accept the turncoat at that point. Tilda also tells Aloy that Regala's rebels were actually backed by Silence, which we had suspected, who shared the capability to override machines as well as his Oseram forces. He planned to use them to first take out Hikaru. Then, with all the Tenakth under one banner, he planned to throw them at the Zeniths like so many meat shields, all as a diversionary tactic while he used his weapons to take out the Zenith's shields and kill them. Sounds like a solid, if brutal, plan.
Yes, he's found a way to circumvent our shields. Truly an exceptional man. He's planned for everything. Except you and me. You see, while his army is battering down Gerard's doors, you and I will sneak in through a back way, one that only I know about, while Silence and my friends are busy battling each other. We'll take back Beta and Gaia.
However, Aloy is not having that. She isn't exactly the type to sacrifice people for her own causes. She asks Tilda, who made her fortune as an expert programmer, to patch her through a direct comlink to Beta. The two hatch a plan together and keep Tilda, and the player, in the dark. Apparently, Aloy wasn't as trusting as I was. All she says that she's going to do is 1. Stop Regala from killing Hikaru and taking over the Tenakth. 2. Find another way to create a diversion. And 3. Make sure Silence shares his tech. In order to make all this happen, though, Aloy has to first use the override that Beta gifted her right before shit hit the fan. The override for a Sunwing. Finally, Aloy would be able to mount a flying machine. So I guess now is as good a time as any to actually talk about overriding and mounts, since I have somehow gone 38 pages, Jesus Christ, without mentioning them. Weird. In Forbidden West, just like Zero Dawn before it, Aloy can override machines. She does this by sneaking up on an unsuspecting machine in the wild and then shoving her spear right up its rear connection port. As I mentioned previously, Aloy gets the capability to override more machines via completion of cauldrons, but she starts the game with a couple already available. Most machines just turn into temporary allies when overridden, which will fight for Aloy, while a few others act as permanent mounts, either until they are destroyed or she gets a new one. This is basically the same as Zero Dawn, except there are a few really cool additions. Firstly, when attacking, Aloy can choose whether the machine acts defensively, only attacking machines that attack Aloy first, or she can make them aggressive, actively seeking out enemy machines and taking the fight to them. Not only that, but there are certain bows that Aloy can purchase, which, when fired, the arrows act as a homing beacon. Shooting an enemy machine with said bow basically paints a target on it, which all of your overridden machines will then pounce on. So I'm gonna go ahead and interrupt here because as I'm editing this video, I realized I didn't have any footage of painting a target on a machine and having others attack it. I had this really cool scenario played out, which I actually did in my original playthrough, but I needed to go back and get the footage of it. When I did that, I couldn't get it to work. I think for whatever reason this mechanic is bugged right now, and my overwritten machines did not respond to my target painting arrows. Instead, they just wanted to go off and attack the nearest raccoon or whatever, or just stand around and do nothing. So I'm not sure what happened there. It seems like it got broken at some point, because whenever I was doing my original playthrough, I got a big group of machines to take down a behemoth, and I thought it was really cool and wanted to share. What's going on, Gorilla? So as I mentioned, other than making your own little armies, you can also ride certain machines like a horsey, and even call them to you. There are only 4 such machines, one of which is the aforementioned Flying Sunwing, which we'll get to in a moment. Firstly, I'd like to compliment Gorilla from breaking with realism somewhat in the mount mechanic. I've mentioned this before, but one thing I disliked about Breath of the Wild was that if Link got too far away from his horsey, the horsey couldn't hear his whistle, and so I'd have to sadly walk back to the stable and teleport the horsey there. Because that makes more sense, I guess. It made the mount system in that game oftentimes less useful and more of a pain. In Forbidden West, though, the mounts don't work that way. If Aloy can see the mount, then it will attempt to physically run from where it is to her. But if she gets too far away or loses the sightline, the mount will just magically pop up behind Aloy immediately. I love it. Totally breaks with realism, but the mount always pops up out of sight, so you can't see it breaking. Another new perk is that the Claw Strider, a mountable machine that looks like an awesome velociraptor, can also act as a weapon. When riding the machine, the player can hit R1 or R2 for light and heavy attacks respectively. It's not the most refined combat, in fact it feels really loose and a bit hard to get control over, but it's fucking awesome that the option is even there. Finally, once Aloy climbs the mountain above the base and tames her first Sunwing, she is able to take to the skies and fly over literally everything in the game. I know such a thing isn't exactly new for games as a medium. At the same time though, I don't think the experience of finally seeing the world from a bird's eye view after spending the entire game always on the ground will ever get old. It's fantastic. Not only that, but on the PS5 there isn't too much pop-in, at least when at lower altitudes. Granted, when Aloy gets really high in the air, it is definitely noticeable. But that's to be expected, honestly, since she can see for miles. Even after 80 hours in the game, I was still learning new mechanics. For example, after hopping off the Sunwing, the machine tends to circle the sky right above Aloy, and one time when I looked up at it, I noticed the little symbol that indicates a grappling point. No way, I thought. That would just be too cool. Sure enough though, I clicked the button and Aloy shot out her hook and zipped right up to the machine mid-flight, even doing a little backflip as she got into the mounted position. Point is, it's awesome and I love it. But let me back up for a second. So, before soaring over the world, my Aloy checked in at the base. The entire team was reeling from Varl's death, Beta's capture, and Aloy going AWOL. Remember, Tilda just swooped in and took her. As far as the team was concerned, she got. Zoe especially was hurting, as she and Varl had grown very close over the course of the game. And since Varl was a character that had been a strong ally ever since the beginning of the first game, it was necessary for Gorilla to really make his passing matter, to let it impact, and not just have the characters brush it off after a couple seconds. Aloy and Zoe both take the time to prepare funeral rites for Varl, in the tradition of Zoe's people, the Utaru. They go out and sit at his resting place, outside the base, high up in the Rocky Mountains, as the sun wanes in the sky, and for a moment, the game just allows the scene to breathe. Nothing is rushed.
Now he can always look out at Plain Song and... further east, to the Nora Sacred Lands.
He would have liked that.
Aloy and Zoe talk of their fond memories of Varl and of their feelings about his death. Zoe tells Aloy that she is pregnant with Varl's child and promises to tell them about their father and of his tribe, to take them here where his soul and his seeds rest. I cried like a little baby. Seriously, hats off to Gorilla for giving that scene the feeling it deserved. I was really afraid that they would try to pull a Rise of Skywalker Chewie death and just have everyone cracking jokes after a few minutes. Instead, even after the funeral scene, dialogue with Zoe especially, and the others, has a more somber, serious tone. That is how you make a character's sacrifice feel real and impactful. But when it's over, Aloy preps the team for the final mission. First, she sends word to the Tenakth to look to the sky. After the invasion of Regalla's rebels begins, she mounts her Sunwing and flies to one of the enormous metal devils that litter the land. On the giant machine is a power cell, which the Sunwing is able to pick up. And when Aloy is just over the battle outside the Tenakth capital, it drops the cell, sending out an EMP wave and knocking all machines out in the nearby vicinity. Quick break in the action. This mechanic, picking and dropping a power cell from any of the metal devils, is yet another one that can be done outside this specific mission, even when just free roaming. So just for shits and giggles, let's put all of these possible flight mechanics together in a scenario. I can have Aloy get on a Sunwing, pick up a cell, fly over an unsuspecting Thunderjaw, drop the cell, creating a huge, awesome explosion that temporarily knocks out the machine, then hop off the Sunwing and use the shield glider down to where the victim lies, shoot some arrows or perform a critical hit or two, and then when it starts to get back up, look to the skies, shoot my grappling hook, and zip on out of there on the back of my awesome mount, like I was never even there. If that scenario does not make you 100% erect or give you a lady boner, then I don't think we can be friends. Okay, back to the story. With the rebel offensive in disarray, Aloy takes the opportunity to follow Regalla as she tries to corner Chief Hekarro. Aloy finally catches up to her and calls her out to duel, which is another topic I haven't really touched on. Human-on-human combat. Sorry, there's just so damn much to cover. Starting in the early game, Aloy is able to take part in these fighting pit challenges, which are new to Forbidden West. They act as tutorials and training grounds for Aloy to learn and test out the melee combos that she unlocks in the skill tree. So, once Aloy masters these moves in the fighting pits, she's able to challenge the pit master, and once all the masters are defeated in each of the Tenakth clan capitals, there's an ultimate master that can be challenged which, when beat, gives Aloy a spear upgrade. It's a cool system that should be a lot of fun to do as a side activity. Only problem is, the pit masters are totally fucked. This is by far my biggest single complaint with the game. The early couple masters aren't bad, but the later ones in the lowlands and the SkyClan capitals, as well as the ultimate masters, are downright awful. Again, I was playing on hard, so there were times in the game when I was fighting a machine and I died and retried as many as 15-20 times before I was successful. But there, just like with Dark Souls, even though it was difficult, it was at least fair. But the pit bosses felt like they were straight up cheating. Rather than fighting them, it felt like I was fighting the game itself. Actually, I was so mad at this part that when I went looking on Reddit for advice, which is something I hadn't done for any other part of the game, there I found many others commiserating over the same thing. And so I'm just going to let them say their part because they hit the nail on the head.
They have insane overtuned lateral tracking and can turn 360 degrees mid-combo, making it extremely difficult and unreliable to dodge. They also slide forward during attacks to make sure you can't reliably avoid them or understand their range. Getting hit once stun locks Aloy into at least another hit. The counter mechanic is just baffling, like, what went wrong here, guys? The game describes it as something enemies do when sensing patterns, but this is a complete lie. Not only do they seem to counter you at literally any time and at random, but it takes a quarter of your health away with a completely unavoidable and unpredictable move.
Or, as the user Neuralzen said,
I love difficult games and challenges, but this is broken to the point where it is just a horrendous thing to surmount and not fun. When I finally get past this, I won't feel accomplished, just that I was finally able to get through a needlessly broken and effectively derelict piece of the game that brought me zero joy, except in the fact that I won't have to hear, "That's it, you're done," again.
Sorry for the long tangent, but I spent so damn long on those guys, and they were genuinely the only bad time I had in this otherwise amazing game. And I do want to make clear, if it already wasn't, these guys were only a small part, and the overall experience was far from ruined. It's just, in my other analysis videos, even if I say 1,000 nice things about a game, I will get 10 comments complaining about the one slightly negative thing I said. As for the duel with Regala, she wasn't super difficult. Definitely not as overtuned as some of the masters, perhaps because she was a mandatory boss. The human-on-human combat is rarely the best thing in the game, but this fight was enjoyable, especially because of the narrative implications. So once Regala is defeated, Aloy and the player are given the final choice: kill her or use her. I chose the latter, feeling like that was the more in-character choice. Aloy isn't the type of person to waste a life, in my opinion, but it was cool to actually have that choice after dealing with her and her little shit rebels the entire game. As for what Regala thinks,
I don't want your mercy.
It's not mercy.
She doesn't like the idea at first, but reluctantly agrees when Aloy promises that the mission will give her an honorable death, which resolves one of the big issues she had with Hikaru in the first place. He refused to kill her when she first rebelled against him, settling instead for exile. So with the Tenakth finally set right, Aloy is able to focus on the mission. She returns to the base with Regala in tow. There, she contacts Silence, letting him know that his little plans will no longer work. She brings in Tilda as well, which the rest of the crew doesn't like very much. But together, she and Aloy are able to convince Silence that his plan will only be successful if they work together. Oh, and Aloy lets him know that should he pull some shit like he did with Hades and Regala, she would end him. Finally, with everyone together and prepared, the crew travels to the beach opposite the Zenith's island, and with that, the final push to end the Zeniths begins. Part 11, The Final Push, or Nemesis Gonna Getcha. The full scope of the plan is revealed to the player in an absolutely awesome cutscene. After infiltrating their way onto the island, Beta releases Hephaestus into the Zenith network, which takes over their super futuristic 3D printer that's able to instantly manufacture machines. With that one move, Aloy's team is both able to create machines to attack and also stop the Zeniths from producing their own. This cutscene is fucking epic, so I'm just going to let it play out for a second.
Our army.
I think you got their attention.
Very clever. You had Beta inject Hephaestus into the base's printer matrix.
Which is faster and more powerful than any cauldron.
And now it can crank out machines to its heart's content.
So now, with the giant Thunderjaws and Slaughter Spines taking out the Zenith base and creating diversion, the team is able to infiltrate further. I'd say that's a little more effective than throwing a primitive human army against a fully working death machine factory, so fucking eat it, Silence. Along the way, though, Regala gets taken out by a few stray specters, detonating explosives to take them with her, which allows the team to continue. That was quick. The goal, in case you forgot, is not only to take out the Zeniths and rescue Beta, but also take back Gaia so she can get to working on fixing the biosphere. As they progress towards where Gaia is kept, however, Gerard and Eric and some of the other high-ranking Zenith members cut off Aloy and her crew. This is Silence Q, who was waiting with his weapon that could take out their shields. He is successful, however, the team gets split when some of the battling machines crash in between the two groups. Aloy, at least, is still able to get through and makes it to the main building. Right as she enters, though, Eric cuts her off. Only this time, he didn't have the shield to protect him, and I was level 40 with some sick-ass weapons and move combos, so yeah. Still though, it was a tough fight, and a good example of this game making human-on-human combat both exciting and fair, unlike the pit bosses, which I'm still salty about. Eric has some really cool and completely unique futuristic techniques, but inevitably he has to die, and die he does, the prick. My girl Zoe takes him out.
Now we're having fun, right?
Which, honestly, given that Eric was the one to kill Varl, felt right. Afterwards, on the home stretch, Aloy makes it to the top of the building, ready to take back Gaia and Beta and end the Zenith threat, finally. It just couldn't be that easy though, could it? Of course not. First, Gerard was somehow able to make it up to the top to cut the two off, but he at least is dispatched by Tilda. But then, Tilda starts to let her own crazy out. I mean, if I'd lived 1,000 years on a ship with those assholes, I'd probably be a little nuts too. As was hinted at before, Tilda had been in a relationship with Elizabeth, so she has this weird obsession with Aloy, being her clone, and to a lesser degree Beta. That's why she helped them, and that's why she had shown Beta some small kindnesses. The Zenith ship was like a desert, and mama thirsty. In the process, it's also finally revealed why the Zeniths left their colony on Sirius in the first place. Nemesis.
It is us. The minds of Far Zenith. Or failed copies of them, anyway.
In previous conversations, their exodus was explained via this vague idea of using up the resources or otherwise causing some environmental calamity, just as they had done with Earth. Which, fits with the allegory of what the rest of the game is about. But oh no, that's not enough horizon for these fucks. What actually happened was that, in their attempts to become immortal, they tried to digitize their consciousnesses. However, the program was considered a failure, and all the conscious minds already uploaded began to coalesce and resent their creators. Somehow, this thing became corporeal and broke containment, destroying the world. Only a small fraction of the colonists were able to escape, pursued by this thing they called Nemesis. It was Nemesis, not the Zeniths, that sent the original signal to Earth in an attempt to destabilize the biosphere and make it uninhabitable for their creators to live on. Kinda petty if you ask me, but you do you. In fact, knowing this, the Zeniths never actually intended on making Earth their permanent residence. They just wanted to scoop up Gaia, to make a home for themselves somewhere else, and were basically just wiping out Earth as a trial run. Okay, that's more petty, for sure. Given all of that and her obsession with Aloy, Tilda tries to convince her to get on the Zenith ship and escape. Obviously, Aloy refuses, and thus begins the final battle. Aloy versus Mech Tilda. Yeah, you heard me. Aloy fights a fucking mech. Actually, it's called like Spectre Prime, but it's a mech. I mean, when you think about it, it's not that different from fighting a giant machine dinosaur, but there's just a person inside. Either way, it's a really cool fight. Even though the fight with Eric was fun, I probably would have been disappointed with the ending had it not been for the Tilda fight. But this wrapped things up nicely with a bow. Finally though, Aloy is successful in taking out Tilda, accidentally killing the woman she had thought was her friend only a few minutes before. It was bittersweet, for her and for me. Just let me have her outfit. That's all I'm asking for, game. Come on. The ending shows all the characters meeting up at the top of the ruined Zenith building, except for Silence. His plan all along wasn't just to stop the Zeniths, but also to steal their ship. See, his interrogation of Hades had revealed the existence and nature of Nemesis, which he hid from Aloy, which is what we call a dick move. But just before the credits roll, as the characters look upon their field of victory, wondering what all this information will mean for Horizon 3, Silence changes his mind and returns.
For a time. You people are going to need all of the help you can get.
And Aloy, who began her life as an outcast, fought her way to becoming a lone hero, is finally surrounded by her found family and flanked by her new sister Beta, knowing that together they can take on anything. So, after 46 pages written and half of my sanity lost somewhere along the way, I hope it's clear to you why I hold this game in such high regard. Never before, or at least not in my recent memory, have I seen a sequel given such a massive improvement to virtually every game system across the board. Or one where the developer just keeps adding more and more and more without the additional content suffering. And the thing is, Zero Dawn was already a fantastic game in its own right. In fact, the only thing I can really compare this type of content addition and improvement with is a live service game like Destiny or Warframe, except those games are launched in a much weaker, more bare-bones state and only gain that extra content and polish over years of smaller updates that are worked on constantly by huge teams of devs. I have absolutely no clue how Guerrilla Games managed to do this, or what type of Faustian bargain they had to make to put it all out in such a finely polished state. It is truly incredible. And considering that studios like Bethesda can't even release the skeleton of a game like Fallout 76 without it completely collapsing in on itself by the weight of all its glitches, it's all the more impressive. So, was that too much praise? Was it too hyperbolic? Well, honestly, I don't care. It's exactly how I feel about this game. Forbidden West has easily joined the ranks of Kena Bridge of Spirits and Ghost of Tsushima as one of my favorite to come out in the last couple years. If I'm being real with myself, it's probably taken that top spot. And if you've watched this long enough, even though I spoiled the main points of the entire plot, there is still a lot that I didn't get to talk about. The majority of the side quests, many of the side character arcs, most of the individual machines and their specific combat tendencies, etc., etc. I mean, hell, it took me 90 hours to finish the game, and there were still some things that I didn't get to complete or discover. So if what I talked about intrigued you, then I highly suggest trying it out for yourself. I think there is enough variety in the game that if you enjoy open world games at all, you will enjoy this one. I want to give a huge special thank you to all my patrons who put up with me while I made this video. It's taken so long, and I thought it was going to be done sooner than it was, but what are you going to do? So thank you guys so much. If you'd like to join them, help me make more content like this. If you enjoy what you see, please head on over to my Patreon. You see a link on the screen right now. And I am done. I'm going to go sleep for like 10 years. Thank you. I'll see you next time.